Elijah 15, 2 Kings 1:1. After the death of Ahab, the Moabites grasped the opportunity to rebel against the occupation and taxation of King Ahaziah. This conflict spanned many centuries. The warring factions fought for more than land and freedom. Deep in their roots, the Moabites and Israelites had family ties dating back to the time of Abraham. A cursory look at this verse of 2 Kings 1:1 would hide the ups and downs of the two families. When Abraham left Haran to make his way to Canaan, the promised land, he ignored an instruction to leave his family behind. He took his nephew Lot, but eventually the prosperous pair had to part as the land could not provide enough grazing and water. Abraham allowed Lot to choose the area he would settle. Greedily he picked the most promising land for pasture. But the Bible says this righteous man was tormented by the sin of those who lived in Sodom and Gomorrah. When God sent 2 angels to destroy the town, it was only the intercession of Abraham that saved Lot and his 2 daughters. According to custom, when Lot found the men in his town square, he offered them hospitality, but he also feared for their safety. During the night, every man in the town arrived at his doorstep seeking to rape and probably murder the visitors. This was the only environment his virgin daughters had known. So, living in a cave, isolated from every other community, they hatched a plan to seduce their father. In desperation, thinking they would never marry and have children, this act of rape resulted in 2 boys, the founders of the Moabites and the Ammonites. The history of the Moabites and Ammonites is checkered. They worshipped Baal and Chemosh. When the opportunity arose, the women of Moabite lured the Israelites into sexual and spiritual misconduct. For example, in the book of Numbers, as a result of this, the leaders and all those who had had intercourse with a Moabite woman were executed. A total of 24,000 men died that day. In chapter 24, fearful of their occupation, the king of Moab tried to persuade Balaam to curse the Israelites, but he ended up blessing them and predicting a messianic destruction of the sons of Sheth, Moab's son. Later, Solomon took wives from the Moabite nation, who turned his heart from fully following God. When trying to rebuild the temple and city walls, Ezra 9:1 and Nehemiah 13:23 both despaired over the intermarriage of the men with the Moabite women. On a positive note, God commanded the Israelites to leave the Moabites alone as they travelled, Deuteronomy 2:9. He had promised land to Lot for a possession. Ruth was a Moabite who became a predecessor to David and Jesus. In Samuel 1:22, David asked the king of Moab to shelter his father, who was of Moab descent. Skipping past Ahab briefly, in the book of Zephaniah 2:9, the prophet declared that their land would become like Sodom and Gomorrah. He foresaw that the land would be possessed by nettles and be a perpetual desolation. He prophesied this would come about because of their pride and boasting. This illustrates what can be missed by a cursory glance at circumstances, relationships and communities. This simple, abrupt sentence which starts 2 Kings hides a story of spiritual temptation in the guise of sexual freedom. Things are rarely what they seem. Anything that has a spiritual element, either overtly or covertly, cannot be neutral. Jesus said, "You either are for me or against me," Matthew 12:30. He warned you cannot mix light and darkness, John 3. He pronounced there is only one way to the Father, which is through me, John 14:6. Yet some Christians and non-believers join and participate in activities of faiths and cults that purport to be spiritually compatible. There are even exercises and meditation regimes whose roots are based in the belief of other spiritual paths and powers. The only way to discover the truth and spiritual safety of these activities is to look beyond the surface. Potential participants need to look into the foundations of an organisation. This needs to include research into the anchors and principles beneath a power source. God did not listen to excuses when he judged the Israelites time and again for being lured into relationships which he knew would lead to harm. He did not deny them the pleasures of wives for any other reason than the dangers they represented. nor is a killjoy now. He knows the dangers that lie behind pseudo-religious organisations. Joshua said, "As for me and my household, I will serve the Lord." Elijah said, "Stop vacillating and compromising between worship of idols and God." The Lord will point out the dangers, but we can also discover a lot for ourselves. If we recklessly rush in, we do what all fools do. That is never a good idea.